Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
E ngā mana o ngā marae, ngā hapu o te rohe pōtai o Tuhoe tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou I raro I te tuenui o te whare nei, me ngā pau kanohi I whakatau I ngā kaupapa e pāna ki a tātou te iwi Māori. Aha kua te roanga o ngā toimaha tanga e pāna ki a koutou I ngā kaupapa kāwanatanga, e ū tonu ki tērā te mana motuhake o te iwi Māori o koutou o Tuhoe. Tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I proudly stand to support the third and final reading of this bill. The many Tuhoe gathered here today to witness a historical moment, I acknowledge you, and I cannot help but be reminded that history has an uncanny way of repeating itself, and at times correcting itself in the past mistakes. I sense that this is one of those times. We debate this bill during the time of Matariki, a time that heralds a new season, the end and the beginning of a new cycle. The passing of legislation for Tuhoe and Urewera settlements today cements an ambition to forge ahead and determine new prospects. We've come a long way from the scorched earth policies etched in the minds of those here today, yet as a nation, much of that story still remains hidden and only resurfaces on occasion and reminds us that there is still so much more to do. Mr. Speaker, Te Paki o Matariki is the coat of arms for the kingitanga and asserts the ambition to strive for mana motuhake, an aspiration which Tuhoe have always maintained as germane to their expression of self, both past, present and future. This year marks the commemoration of 150 years since the New Zealand Land Wars, a cogent point in our country's history that led to some of the bloodiest engagements between iwi and colonial forces. Māori nationalism was at the fore of these engagements, and the aspiration to hold on to our lands, continue to assert Māori authority, was at its core. In remembering that history and asserting a new future, it serves as a timely reminder that treaty settlements have a significant part to play in the reconciliation and redress for past wrongs, and the way in which the Crown, on behalf of all New Zealanders, seeks a durable outcome. And I want to acknowledge the Right Honourable Jim Bolger in the House today, who is listening to this and commenced some of that process. Tēnā koe. This intent will be held to account over many generations, not simply by the words we say today, but by the actions we undertake tomorrow and into the future as parliamentarians, as members of the government, as representatives of the Crown. In the first reading debate, I considered that many iwi would be looking to the provisions of the Urewera management arrangements over the national park as a precedent for their own conservation and natural heritage areas. But there is more to the reason why this arrangement was able to be achieved in such a significant way for the people of Tuhoe. Some of that has been commented on by the Minister. Just before you get to the steps of Parliament, the imposing statue of Richard Seddon welcomes visitors onto the grounds of our Parliament. The same man had promised to Tuhoe a pact following the incessant conflict between military forces in Tuhoe. The late Judith Binney's account states that, quote, Seddon invited a Tuhoe delegation to Wellington in September 1895, when a new compact between the Crown and Tuhoe was forged. Tuhoe affirmed their acknowledgement of the Crown's authority, while the Crown acknowledged and agreed to respect the mana motuhake, or independent authority, of Tuhoe. This time, the tribal protectorate was confirmed by legislation, the Urewera District Native Reserves Act 1896, or Te Ture Motuhake o Tuhoe. I make comment of that because the significance of this occasion was marked back then by the gift of a taiaha from a renowned Tuhoe rangatira, Kereru, to Seddon. Binney notes that this gift was a symbolic affirmation of peace in return for the recognition of Tuhoe mana motuhake over their lands. It appears to me that in part today makes good on something that occurred some many years prior, and I want to acknowledge that this is an important day for New Zealand as much as it is for Tuhoe. I also want to recognise that the country is celebrating Te Reo Māori this week. Many Tuhoe educators have been instrumental over a long period of time to reaffirm Te Reo Māori in schools and in communities throughout the country and in our academic learning institutions. That remains the case today. It was not uncommon in my hometown in Huntly during the 1980s that a whole lot of Waikato kids would be running around Rākaumanga School with a distinct Tuhoe dialect, thanks to Bāna Hiramia. Even when I got to university, I remember fondly my lecturer, Whaia Ani Black, and her determination to encourage us above all else, me kōrero tō reo Māori. People might appreciate how refreshing that was against a linguistic backdrop of Professor Bruce Biggs, who deconstructed the language to a sequential pattern that could be traced across the Pacific. Hauwe. Tēnā koe Whaia Ani. So it is no surprise to me anyway that the aspirations of a Tuhoe Education Authority is the culmination of an extensive contribution of Tuhoe, Tū Te Reo and Mātauranga Māori over a long period of time. My previous contribution to the debates on this particular settlement have been extensive, and I do not intend to repeat previous contributions. In summary, as a member of the Select Committee, it was my privilege to consider the bill alongside other Select Committee members, well chaired by the Honourable Tau Henare. And it was painfully evident, similar to our experience back home, that the settlement has had its challenges, both internally and externally. But only time, understanding, intent and a commitment to the future generations may soften some of that mamae that may still pervade. By and large, I sense a great deal of optimism. There's been a need to forge and reaffirm key relationships with bordering iwi, and I consider the representations of Ngāti Ruapani, of Te Upokorihe, and just comment that again this matter requires ongoing vigilance. Also Ngāti Manawa actually, looking at the member. Representation and governance for and by the people of Tuhoe, the Tuhoe way, can only be assessed by Tuhoe, nobody else. We all learn better from our own experiences and create our threshold of what best practice looks like. Once the settlement is reached and the new governance structure is in place and Tuhoe get on with their business, a great deal of many people would want to comment on how that is done. But actually, it's up to Tuhoe to determine for themselves what is best for them. We should stay out of it. Attracting tribal members home to help might well be the consequence of such a significant settlement. It does come with a huge level of expectation of all your tribal members sitting outside your boundary, thinking, gee, how can I help out? Oh, what if I get called back home? Our experience, if I can be so bold to share, is that no matter where our people reside and how they contribute throughout society in their different areas, putting their skills to the best use possible, it all helps to build the mana of the iwi. And when they are called home, let's not put a greater expectation on our own tribal members than we do on anybody else. Sometimes we can be the worst critics of ourselves. This settlement is the most significant since that of Ngaitahu and Waikato Tainui. It is an opportunity for Tuhoe to look forward, holding on to what is uniquely Tuhoe and will never be lost for the benefit of future generations of Tuhoe. I'm so proud to be a small part in the cog of a wheel that can help this waka move further. I want to thank the negotiators who lucidly presented the full context of the settlement to the Select Committee, Tamati Kruger and your team. I also want to thank the Crown negotiators for the way in which you addressed with what it appears a great deal of sincerity, the way in which this particular settlement hangs together. The Select Committee staff for your perseverance with us as Select Committee members, asking our questions and finding the information before we got to the outcome. Our Chair Tau Henare, awesome, brother, ka kite anō. Yeah, I think what you allowed the Select Committee to do was pursue any line of questioning that could give us full satisfaction that we were attempting to make sure that this was a robust and well thought through marrying of the deed of settlement with the legislation. It is with some regret that I have that we haven't got unanimity in the House. Finally, I want to recognise the Minister. Minister Finlayson, you in your own speech have more than adequately outlined how important and unique this settlement is, and that to arrive to this point, at this point in time, I certainly commend you and the government. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, Labour happily supports the third reading of this bill.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, can I start tēnā koutou to all the members of Tuhoe who are gathered here today? Can I acknowledge the Right Honourable Jim Bolger, former Prime Minister.